Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad to have you with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Jim Garrity is back from Atlanta today and now awaiting word from the Falcons about whether he's going to get the head coaching job there. That's not really the reason for the trip, but he's back, which is good news, and back just before the snow came for the second time this week. It is a snow day, and so if you happen to hear squeals of delight in the background, the kids are sledding out back. Jim, on to our good, bad, and crazy martinis in just a second. We should also give a shout out today to those braving the snow and the chilly temperatures in Washington today for the March for Life. It started 50 years ago, basically a year after the infamous 1973 Roe v. Wade decision. Of course, in 2022, the Supreme Court struck down Roe. So my suggestion, Jim, and I know they've made the March for Life a hugely successful event, hundreds of thousands of people, even though the weather's usually not that great. Roe was overturned on June 24th. So maybe instead of, as Clark Griswold's father said in Christmas Vacation, freezing their baguettes off every year, maybe they could do it in June and be a little more comfortable before the really sweltering temperatures of the summer hit. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But good on the pro-lifers braving the cold every year.
It's their call, and I'm sure there was a great deal of pride that they could get such large crowds to show up in, usually frigid weather. Sometimes they got snow. But hey, you want to do it in June? I think people will be even more eager to come out to D.C. on that day.
Well done, everyone involved with the March for Life. You've definitely made a difference, I think, in building up to the recent decision. But let's get to our... Actually, there is no good martini. I was wrong about that. There's bad, and crazy martinis today to close out the week. And we start with frigid temperatures, particularly in Chicago. Double-fisted here in two different stories. First from the Wall Street Journal in their notable and quotable section. It's not a good story for Tesla. In a painfully chilly parking lot in Chicago on Tuesday, Tesla drivers huddled in their cars waiting for a charge. Jocelyn Rivera was experiencing a bit of buyer's remorse. She sat with the heat blasting in her 2023 Tesla Model 3 as she juiced up the battery. If you're waiting in that line and you only have 50 miles, you're not going to make it, she said, gesturing to the line of vehicles stretched out onto the nearby avenue. She said she had seen a Tesla run out of battery after trying to cut in line because it was so close to running out. In normal conditions, Ms. Rivera's car can drive up to 273 miles on a single 30-minute charge. This week, she said she woke up to find about a third of her car battery drained from the overnight cold, and she has spent hours every morning waiting in line to recharge the battery. Not to be outdone, we also have this anecdote over from the Irish Star where you've got folks explaining that the cars aren't working at all. They have one driver, Tyler Bears, said he was stuck for hours after trying to charge his car at a station in Oak Brook, Illinois. Quote, nothing, no juice, still on 0%, he said of his attempts to revive his battery. Quote, and this is like 3 hours being out here after being out here 3 hours yesterday. Jim, before we get to the point of mandates, which should never happen at all, of course, you might want to make sure these things actually work for millions of people who are going to need them in a variety of temperatures. The fact that this is now just coming to light is pretty embarrassing for everyone who thinks this is the immediate future.
Yeah, and look, there's nothing like a big batch of cold weather to call your attention to whether your car can start in cold weather and whether your car will function in cold weather. Now, the last time we talked about this on the podcast, I heard from a friend who has an electric vehicle and who loves it. And I'm like, great, that's good for you. If it works for you and it gets you around and you feel it's reliable, great. My friend also pointed out that he charges at home overnight. Well, that's great. When you're doing a long road trip from one place to another, you don't have that option. Do gasoline-powered cars sometimes have a tough time getting started in the morning? Yeah, it happens. Not nearly as often, but it does happen. What we're seeing here is this claim, it's not going to, the battery is just going to drain down faster. It's not going to charge as fast. So you're going to need a heated garage. Well, some people just don't have garages. That's problem number one. Two, people don't have heated garages. And three, I thought the whole point of this was to save energy. Right. Allegedly, the point of one of the things they said, the maintenance issues for electric cars is lesser because they have fewer moving parts, less wear and tear. And it seemed like that was the case, but now we're actually finding in practice that, when these things break down, getting into the repair place is an absolute pain in the neck. So, again, the Three Martini Lunch podcast, despite people's perceptions, is not anti-electric vehicles. It's just kind of like, know what you're getting and recognize that what works for certain, like if you're just tooling around a urban or suburban environment and there's a lot of chargers in your area and you feel pretty good and you can charge at home, okay, maybe it works well for you. But for people who have to do long hauls, it's probably not going to be that way. And of course, you're adding to your electrical bill by charging your car every night. That's not a charge you have. Now, you got to do the math on that. You got to say, is that what going to be less than what I pay filling up the tank with gasoline? Well, with these administration policies, maybe it is. But ideally, you'd have an affordable way to get around, and what works for one family or one household is not necessarily going to work for other ones. And the X factor of will it work in cold weather? Well, there's a whole bunch of states that would say, whoa, I need some answers on that before I can sign on the dotted line.
No, absolutely correct. And yeah, we're not anti-electric vehicle. We are anti-mandate. At least I certainly am. And, when we were talking about Javier Milei yesterday and his whole point of, you're going to be successful if you make a superior product and give it at a competitive or a better price. So EV has done neither so far. If they improve, let the market decide. And if people want that, let them have it. But forcing it on people like California is trying to do, and all these states, including our own, which back in the Northam administration decided they were going to do whatever California did, which was not smart. Anyway, so good luck to the EV drivers in these cold environments. I can't imagine the frustration, but there are other options. So if you can unload it on someone, you might want to buy one of the more traditional models. All right, speaking of staying warm, let's talk about our great sponsors from 4Patriots and their website, 4patriots.com, where you can find fantastic deals on products from generators to survival food kits. Right now, you can get the Sauna Wrap Therapeutic Blanket. But that sounds pretty good if you've been trying to charge your vehicle for the last several hours. 80% off right now, so check that out. Also, the Starfire Camp Stove, buy 3, get 1 free. But the Patriot Power Generator 2000X is where you want to be at to protect against winter storms. Solar generators charge more devices for longer in a blackout. Double the capacity and more peak power than ever before. Plus, new expandable capability for even more power. It'll keep your fridge, your freezer, your medical devices, and a whole lot more going without the need for any gas. It comes with a solar panel, fume-free, silent, and safe, 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone. And get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to a also double-fisted bad martini about Joe Biden. One about policy, one about his, well, let's just say mental fitness for the office that he holds and apparently wants to hold for almost exactly 5 more years. And let's just say the evidence is piling up that doesn't seem like a very good idea. So first of all, we've got Biden departing the White House yesterday for an event. You can hear the helicopter engines in the background. There's a number of questions that he was asked about, Iran and Pakistan, which Jim wrote about in yesterday's Morning Jolt, and a couple of other things. But one of them was, are the airstrikes against the Houthis working? So you'll hear the question and Biden's tortured response.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working?
Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
So, Jim, they're not stopping the Houthis from, changing what they are doing there, but they are going to continue. So either he thinks eventually they'll have an impact, or he's just doing them, even though they're having no impact at all. We'll get to the other thing in just a second, but what do you make of that analysis of what's happening with the Houthis?
I know sometimes I probably sound like a broken record pointing this out, but Biden doesn't do formal press conferences anymore. You don't see him come out to the podium and ask take questions from 15, 20 reporters and give lengthy, meaty answers to this. And you don't see him doing sit-down interviews with prominent news organizations anymore. Televised, non-televised, newspapers, television networks, just doesn't do it. What you get are these quick exchanges with reporters on his way to Marine One. And one, you'll notice his answers are not very long, never more than like 2 or 3 sentences about that. 2, as I lay out in today's Morning Jolt, they're not all that coherent. They certainly aren't going into any level of detail. And in this one, they're not working, but we're going to keep doing them, really is probably the worst. If you want to give a succinct answer, that's probably the worst combination there. And in fact, by the way, I don't think the Pentagon would say, our attacks aren't working. I think they'd be able to list all of the Houthi assets and or Houthis that have been destroyed in these airstrikes. As I say in Washington, hey, he's lost a little speed off his fastball. No, his answers are really barely coherent and not very persuasive. And Biden was never the best communicator, but this is not. This is about what you'd expect, perhaps, from an 81-year-old man. And I think there's a good reason you don't see him doing as many public events, and you don't see him doing rallies, and you don't see him doing any give and take with people. This is not good. And the other thing is also we're effectively at war with the group in Yemen, and the president has not addressed the country. Some days it's front page news, some days it isn't. It just feels really undercovered, the same way that the fact that we still have hostages in the hands of Hamas feels really undercovered. There are big issues that ordinarily would be a big deal that just barely, it feels like they just get, check the box coverage. And man, it always seems to work out very well for the administration. Otherwise, saturation coverage of the fact of what are we doing to stop the Houthis from disrupting Red Sea shipping. I feel like more in-depth coverage of that would only give tougher questions for Biden.
But wait, there's more, as they say in the infomercial, because after he got on the chopper, he went to North Carolina, which is represented in part in the House of Representatives by Democratic Congresswoman Deborah Ross. And so Biden gets on stage and has this to say as he begins his speech.
I also want to mention Congresswoman Deborah Ross. Where's Deborah? I just had my picture taken with her. That's probably why she left. No, all kidding aside. Anyway, she couldn't be here, actually. That's not true. I got it mixed up. And she has, she fights very hard for the people of this district, and she's up in Washington right now.
Now, Jim, I understand that in the prepared remarks that if the staff had been expecting the Congresswoman to be there, you say, oh, I want to say hi to her. Oh, she couldn't be here. But when he says, I just took a picture with her, and then realizes, oh, yeah, she's actually not even here. That, piggybacking on what you had to say before, is perhaps even more disturbing.
Yeah. Remember the time he asked if Jackie Walorski was there and she'd passed away a couple months earlier in a car accident?
Yeah.
Look, anybody can have, what I call a brain fart moment, something where you say the wrong thing that happens. With Biden, it happens pretty frequently. And it is just kind of straight, they're the sort of things that if you saw this in your father or your grandfather, you'd feel nervous, that he's just not fully aware of what's going on around him. We've seen all the times he's had to be kind of guided to where he's going to be walking to by somebody else, either on stage or at the White House or something like that. Look, we have a very old president, and age is really starting to catch up with him. And it's just very hard to believe, the rest of the White House staff tells us, he's working so hard and we can have so much energy at his age, we can barely keep up. We know that's not the case. We can see the man. And the fact that if he was doing so great, we would see him more often. He continues to do about one public event per day on weekdays, not every day of the week, sometimes 4 days a week. It's around the middle of the day. He doesn't do them early in the morning, doesn't do them late at night, and he reads off a teleprompter. And maybe you get a couple of minutes of answering questions in front of, shouted by reporters on the way to Marine Force One. They are hiding this president. And I suspect they're hiding this president because a lot of days he doesn't look and sound very good. And they're only going to put him out there when he's in his best at his hours. Well, the presidency is really kind of a 24/7 job. And it just is, we will see if they come out and the Biden's presidency ends and we read all the presidential memoirs and everybody says, yes, he was always energetic and doing cartwheels down the hall in the White House. Okay, fine. I'll say I'm wrong. My sneaking suspicion is that when all is said and done with Biden presidency, either, at the end of this year or, in a couple of years from now, we will hear that Biden was in really rough shape for much of his presidency and everybody did their part to hide it from the public, which is not the way this country is supposed to work.
Well, more sleep for him, more sleep for everyone in this campaign would be good. Biooptimizers is the way to get that. Magnesium breakthrough, specifically by Biooptimizers, is the way to get all the magnesium you need for a better night's sleep. And right now, 10% off any order at biooptimizers.com/martini using the promo code Martini.
Unlike other magnesium supplements that might be giving you just one or two forms of magnesium, Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind and help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. In fact, it also helps improve digestion, supports muscle recovery, and can help support healthy bone density.
Do yourself a favor and make Magnesium Breakthrough part of your daily routine this year so you can get the vitality you need to conquer your dreams. Go to biooptimizers.com/martini and then enter the promo code Martini to get 10% off any order. Again, that's biooptimizers.com/martini, biooptimizers.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And if you ask voters, what's the most important issue? Right now, they usually start with the economy. The border's way up there. Education is a big one, of course. Many, many different issues. And it's important when they send people to Washington, whether in the House or the Senate or the White House itself, they expect action on the issues that matter most to them, hopefully in a way that preserves and expands freedom, of course. Then we've got California Congressman Ted Lieu. Ted Lieu has got his finger on the critical issue of our time, Jim. This week, he has introduced the Glue Trap Prohibition Act, which is a bill to place a national ban on the possession and use of glue traps to catch rodents. He says glue traps, boards coated with adhesive to catch and kill pests, are among the cruelest ways to eliminate rodents. In their attempts to escape the glue, animals may tear off their skin, and some may even gnaw off their own limbs. Animals that do not escape die of blood loss, suffocation, or dehydration. And glue traps also pose a public health risk. Now, if they do actually pose a risk to humanity, that's something to take a closer look at. But Jim, of all the things that fire you up that a change has to be made, does discomfort for mice and rats register anywhere in the top 10,000?
My first thought when I saw this story, Greg, was did a rat introduce this legislation? Or is Congressman Lieu still in the grip of Big Rat? Now, I'll make an observation. Both growing up and more recently, we live out in a fairly wooded part of Fairfax County. We get occasionally mice. And back growing up in New Jersey, we'd occasionally have mice. And we actually did use glue traps once. And listeners, this is not going to be pleasant to hear. So, you may want to fast forward to 30 seconds or so. We caught a mouse, and then the mouse simply ripped its own fur out and got away. So if you want to say they're ineffective, okay, yeah, we had a mouse more recently. We tried getting the no-touch traps where they have a nice little plastic condo that they go into, and they just stay in there. They get trapped, and then the idea is you throw out the whole trap. You don't have to deal with it. My father-in-law told me, Jim, those traps don't work. Only the old-fashioned ones work. Dag nabbit, he was right. For some reason, they just weren't interested in whatever we put into the plastic no-touch traps. And also, by the way, they had a disturbing ability to get the cheese or peanut butter or whatever we put on there off there without tripping the trap. I don't know how they were doing it. I'm going up against super genius mice or something like that. Maybe it was Jerry who kept escaping Tom all those years. But so if Ted Lieu wants to just make a public service announcement, dear America, you want to get rid of your mice, go with the old-fashioned traps. Glue traps don't work that well. Fine, okay? As for the suffering of the mouse, I'm not into animal cruelty. I don't like it. But on the other hand, hey, you chose to come into my house. As far as we're going to kill them. So the idea that, we're going to kill them slowly or unpleasantly with glue traps is bad. But again, I think the easiest way to explain this, Greg, is do you remember back during the 2000 campaign, George W. Bush ran an ad that had Democrats, and then the word rats was on the screen. Now, here's the thing. Now, they also had like other words on the screen, and they would just kind of flash a few letters from it. So if it Republicans, cans, or something like that. But there was an honest to goodness argument from the Gore campaign and every Democrat saying, oh, this is subliminal messaging. George W. Bush and his campaign are trying to brainwash Americans into thinking that Democrats are rats. Well, here we are. Ted Lieu saying it's time to get rid of rat traps that are glue based or too cruel. Maybe they were just ahead of the curve, Greg.
That might be the dumbest campaign controversy of all time, because you could clearly see the word Democrats at various points flashing around the screen, and that's just what happened to pop up. And the only entertaining part was George W. Bush responding to that and trying to say the word subliminal, and it coming out subliminal.
Yes, yeah,
yeah. It was that was highly entertaining.
And let's just point out, if Bush couldn't pronounce it, he wasn't going to use it. By the way, I also would point out, because then people say, oh, Jim, ha, ha, ha. What about, all the times Bush warned us about nuclear weapons and the nuclear programs of Iraq and things like that? Well, you know who else pronounced it nuclear, Greg?
Too many people, but who?
Jack Bauer.
That's right.
Jack Bauer. If Jack Bauer says it's nuclear, if Jack Bauer says it's a 3-syllable word, then it's a 3-syllable word.
As I recall it, one of the press dinners, Laura Bush made fun of him for not being able to say that correctly. So, yeah, the malapropisms ran far and wide with President Bush. But, wow. So, yeah, Ted Lieu, go ahead. Give it a try. I don't really care. But well,
he's going to win the rat vote. There are a lot of rats who are like, okay, Ted Lieu, you're showing you know what to do. So that's my guy. That's
okay.
Right
how do they skew? Do they skew left? Probably.
Greg, come on. Do we even need to ask that? Happy Friday, everybody.
Exactly. Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast if you don't already and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific weekend, and please join us on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.